I think the perfect name for this series would be Ultra Beginner. Hey, I'm just Amos. Welcome back to Life of Robert's Wife. This video is the top 5 things I think you need to know before you even consider starting to sew. The first tip I think you need to consider before you get started with someone making it a hobby or even considering it to be a business is you need to know your motive. What is your why? What is your main reason for wanting to sew? There are times when we get excited and we get in a little bit over our heads, and then when we get started, we kind of figure out this is not for me. So I really want you to make sure that you know your motive, you stick with it, because there will be good times, there will be bad times. And if you have a motive, if you have your reason, it will keep you grounded and established so that you won't quit. I'm telling you, it's going to be rough times. Even in business, I have a lot of soul sisters who have their own businesses, and they share some of their stories and their testimonies even with their customers. And customers like that transparency, but even though we make nice pictures and we post them on social media, behind the scenes it's not always that pretty. Sometimes you prick your finger, sometimes you ruin fabric, and sometimes your machine just stops working. So before you hit those bumps in the road, I think you need to consider why you want to do this. Keep it at the forefront of your mind and keep going regardless of what happens. Tip number 2 would be, have you counted up all the costs? A budget. One of the first questions that I always see from newbies is, what are the best machines that I should get? Should I get a serger? Should I have a cover stitch machine? Which one is the best? Now, the thing is, you need to have a budget in mind. There are simpler sewing machines that range from under $100 to some that can be over $10,000. So it's whatever your budget requires for you to spend. Because remember, if your wallet says no, then it's a no-go, right? Now, behind me, as you can see, I have a Brother CS 6000, and I love my machine. I think that it would be the perfect machine. If you've done your research and you typed in what are the best sewing machines, this baby right here always comes up in the top 10. Now, the best thing about this machine is that it actually has 3 different speeds to it. So it has a slow, medium, and fast. So if you're a newbie, like an ultimate beginner, then this would be best for you, because then you can slide it over to the slowest, and it's represented by 1 arrow. The medium is represented by 2 arrows, and the fastest is represented by 3 arrows. So if you're a newbie, then you would slide the button over to the first arrow, which is the slowest speed. And that way you can work on controlling your foot on the pedal, because if you go super fast and your fabric gets away from you, then you're going to be messed up and you're going to get frustrated. So I believe this is one of the best machines. Now, there are different types of machines. People usually name Brother or Singer machines. Both machines sew well, and it's just a personal preference. Some people have both Brother and Singer sewing machines, and then you have some of the more expensive, like Genome and Husqvarna. I don't have any of those machines. I do have a Baby Lock, but that's a serger that I was gifted. But as far as my sewing machines, I stick with Brother. Something else you need to consider: once you purchase your sewing machine, you find the perfect one, you also need to make sure that you're able to afford the service of the machine. A machine needs to be serviced every year. Some people like to do it on their own, but it's up to you. And of course, if you do something and you mess it up, it could be more costly to fix it. But there are numerous YouTube videos on how to clean machines, and you can do a little upkeep on your own. But it's best also just at least once to take it to be serviced. I know with my machine, the local sewing machine retailing company here told me that to service my machine would be like $99 an hour. And in my mind, I was like, my machine costs pretty much a little bit over that. I would rather buy a new machine. But if your baby is working good, you need to make sure that you keep it up as well. Okay, so tip number 3. So now you know your motive. and you know you're going to stick with it. Once you purchase your machine, you researched, you found the perfect machine within your budget, and you know that also if you purchase your machine, that you also will be able to afford to service. And if it's not in your budget right now to service, you know that, hey, I can do this myself. Now you need to know the needed supplies for your sewing. So of course our first main supply would be our sewing machine, but we need other materials as well. And this is all basically under knowing your budget. You're going to need thread, sewing needles, both hand needles and needles for your sewing machine. Hand needles are required when the pattern calls for you to do hand stitching. A great pair of scissors or a rotary cutter and blades. A cutting board. You can either use a self-healing cutting board, which is the best, or a cardboard cutting board. Measuring tape, pins or clips, pattern weights or pins or clips, seam rippers, bobbins, a great iron, and ironing board. All of these supplies can be purchased at your local department store, or you can go to a specialty store like Joann's. They also can be ordered online. Tip number 2 is, have you counted up all the costs? You need to have a budget. You need to have a set budget for your machine and all the materials that you need. You also need to make sure that the machine that you buy, that you will also be able to afford the service payments once your machine messes up or any part needs to be replaced. Tip number 3 included all the supplies that you would need outside of your sewing machine. And now we come to tip number 4, your fabric choice. Are you going to start off with your knits or your wovens? Because we're not really getting too in depth, I'll give you a short version of what knit fabric is. Knit fabric is the stretchy fabric. This is the fabric that causes you just to push something over your head like a t-shirt or a bodycon dress. Woven fabrics have no stretch. An example are a pair of my husband's pants here. These are khaki pants. In order for you to put on most wovens, you would need a zipper. And you can think pants. You would also think of a button-down blouse or a heavy coat. Some people have their personal choice of which fabrics they would like to work with or begin with first. It's all personal preference. Every person will say something different. But for me, if I was going to teach somebody something, the first fabrics I would teach would be with woven. And those are basically your cottons. And those are where your dresses and your button-down blouses or zipper skirts. Those are made from woven, which are non-stretch fabrics. It's very easy to manage. You won't see it slipping and sliding on your machine. So if anything, go to Walmart or go to your local fabric store and get a couple of yards of the cotton. Knit fabrics are also easy to work with, but it can be a little frustrating at the beginning, especially when you really are beginning, because you need to also know the right needle and the right thread to go with it, because it can be frustrating. Your needle can be jammed and you would want to throw your project out the window along with your sewing machine. So in order to just cut down on frustrations, then I think the best thing that you would need to work with at the beginning are woven fabrics such as cotton and Cara fabric. And it's a little cheaper as well, because you can go to Walmart and you can just get a yard or two of muslin. And muslin is basically the rough draft fabric. Okay, it's just a cheap fabric, thin fabric, and you just make your project in the muslin fabric, and then once you see how it fits and everything fits well, and then you go and use your pretty expensive fabric to make the garment. I know that you're ready to just jump in and just start making clothes or purses or decorations for your house, but it's easier if you just learn one skill at a time. Start slow. And for those of you who will make clothing, make sure that you make something that you will actually wear. Don't spend time or money on patterns, because you can become a hoarder. Trust me. One day I might give you a tour of my sewing room, but you don't want to waste money on things that you're not going to wear or things that are not basically your style. So know your style, stick with it, get out your machine, dust that box off. If you have been gifted a machine and it has been sitting on your floor, it has become a makeshift bookcase and everything is being stacked on it, take this stuff off, dust your machine off, take it out the machine, turn it on, get started. So up next is getting to know your machine.